On the 2nd of May 2009, about 40 Hunns and Hunn relatives gathered at Wildcat Manor near Camden, Delaware, to hear a presentation on the history of Wildcat and the Hunn family, as well as a presentation from Delaware State University on their plans for the site. This is a reproduction of the talk given there, the first part of it, and to be uploaded onto YouTube. A project of this size cannot be done without a lot of support. The biggest help, of course, was Aunt Kitty, who wrote a history of Wildcat and the Hunn family. She worked on it from 1940 to 79, and most of what you're hearing today will be related from Aunt Kitty's history. In addition, my Uncle Bill Hunn provided a memoir of Wildcat with a lot additional information which is also being used today. We certainly have to thank Shirley Hunn for selling Wildcat to the county with terms for its preservation both as a county park and the Wildcat Manor and the surrounding acres as a freedom center. My wife Barbara supported this project every step of the way and arranged for the music at the sign dedication for this afternoon. Michael Richards was our man on the scene. Whenever something needed to be done in Camden, he was right there to help. He even went out and helped install the sign at the burial ground. Professor Samuel Hoff from Delaware State University arranged for the chairs, arranged for Wildcat to be open, security, and for the porta-johns. So we really thank him for his support, and we thank all of you for coming and providing family history and photos and generously supporting the burial ground project. Today we're going to go over a little bit of Delaware history and talk about our Delaware ancestors and how the Hunns ended up in Delaware, history of Wildcat, followed by a presentation by Professor Sam Huff from Delaware State University, and then a period of comments and questions from family members. We'll then go to lunch, and after lunch visit the Newell Hunn burial ground where we'll dedicate the sign. After that, we'll stop at the Murderkill burial ground where lots of Hunns, Mifflins, and Jenkins are buried, and then on to the Camden Meeting House, which has undergone an enormous renovation and the construction of a new green education building. On May 2nd, I asked the question, who has never been to Wildcat before? And a number of hands went up. Then I asked, who has a last name Hunn or a maiden name of Hunn, including spouses? And I'd say about a third of the hands went up. I then asked, how many here have a parent with last name Hunn or maiden name Hunn, not counting the people who already put their hand up, and about another third went up. And who knows why the name is Wildcat? Wildcat is the English name for the name of the wildcat that the Indians called this spot, the place of the wildcat. What's the name of the river it flows by here? The name of the river is the St. Jones River, which is a strange name because there was never a St. Jones. But a man named Jones owned it, and in the old way they wrote, it was written as said to be Jones, and that said to be somehow got turned into Saint. Now, we asked the question, why is Delaware called the first state? And most people knew it's because Delaware is the first state to sign the... There are many Quakers in Delaware. Official name is the Society of Friends, who fought against slavery. Our Hunn ancestors were all Quakers. Delaware was a slave state. It was south of the Mason-Dixon line. Well, it's interesting to note that by 1860 there were only 1,800 slaves in a population of 90,000, and there were 20,000 freed African Americans. And you can see it in this graph here, which I obtained from the Star Hill Church. You can see in 1790 the red lines indicate slaves and the green lines freed African Americans. In 1790, 2/3 of the African Americans in Delaware were slaves, and this number kept dropping until by the time of the Civil War in 1860, less than 1/10 of the African Americans in Delaware were still slaves. Our Delaware ancestors were Priscilla Kitchen Hunn, and she married a Nathaniel Hunn up in the Massachusetts Bay Company, and he was killed in an Indian War after she had 3 children. She then married George Bowers, and Quakers weren't being treated very well up in Massachusetts, so they emigrated down to Delaware. Priscilla Kitchen Hunn outlived 4 husbands. She had children, I think, by the first 3. She died at age 72. She had 3 children first marriage, Priscilla Hunn, Sarah Hunn, and Nathaniel Hunn III, who is our ancestor. Now this is very interesting. I found this on the web. Priscilla's descendants have played no small part in Delaware affairs. In a limited list, all of whom, with the exception of those named Hunn, trace their descent through women, are 6 Delaware governors, of whom 1 was candidate for the U.S. Vice Presidency, the State Chancellor, and 2 of his associate judges, a judge of the U.S. District Court, a former Delaware Chief Justice, and others of the bar, 5 congressmen and 4 Delaware Secretary of State, and much more. Now you have to be prepared when you do family history. This was about Nathaniel Hunn V. We're not descended from him. In the minutes of the Quaker Meeting House from 1781, we see the entry that his marriage was reported to the meeting to have been conducted orderly. But it being hinted that a great concourse of people was gathered at the house after the solemnization, therefore this account is unpleasant and distressing to many minds. Friends are therefore earnestly desired to avoid pompous entertainments on such occasions. Large invitations are gathering in future. So, be warned. Now this is our line. Starting at George Hunn, who came from England with his son Nathaniel Hunn, sometime after the Mayflower, but before 1640, because he died in Massachusetts Bay Company in 1640, apparently after being treated very badly. His son Nathaniel Hunn the first married Sarah Keene, and his son married Priscilla Kitchen, who we talked about. Then we went through Nathaniel Hunn the third, the fourth, Jonathan Hunn, who acquired Wildcat in 1761. Then we went through the Ezekiels. Ezekiel Hunn the first, second, third, and finally Roland Hunn became the owner of Wildcat in the 20th century, and finally, after the Second World War, Allen Hunn became the owner, along with his wife Shirley Johnson. Now this is a chart that's very important to understand if you're going to know anything about the history of the Hunns in Delaware. Ezekiel Hunn the first married Tabitha Newell, and she died in 1813. He then married Hannah Austin. Now Ezekiel Hunn and Tabitha had several children, one of whom was Ezekiel Hunn II. And you go down the line, Ezekiel Hunn II, third, Roland Hunn, and Allen Hunn. So this is the branch of the Hunn family that owned Wildcat. Since Ezekiel Hunn married Hannah Austin, also had children, one of whom is John Hunn. John Hunn and Ezekiel Hunn II are half-brothers because they have the same father, but they have different mothers. And John Hunn is often referred to as John Hunn the Abolitionist. He's the one that helped so many slaves escape to freedom, the first of whom was Harriet Tubman. John Hunn's son was born as Jonathan Hunn, but he later took the name John Hunn Jr., and he became governor of Delaware in 1901. His daughter, Alice Hunn, was born in 1881. As you can see, she is actually the second half-cousin of Roland Hunn, who was born just a year later. So Roland Hunn and Alice Hunn were contemporaries. And the Hunn boys always said that Alice Hunn was the prettiest girl in all of Delaware. However, she was courted by Jenkins, by a number of the Jenkins boys, and she kept waiting for one of them to pop the question, and none of them ever did, so she married Thomas Brown. And their child is John Hunn Brown, and John Hunn Brown's sister, Alice, is the one who donated money to the Camden Meeting House that allows them to do the renovation that's going on right now.